Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, depending on where you're joining us from. We have folks here from APAC, from Africa, the EU, South Central, and North America. Welcome all. Thanks for joining us today for the first session of our 2024 Fundamentals of Sponsorship series. We would like to acknowledge today's date, particularly Rebecca and I are both in our Toronto office. We want to recognize the significance of today's date. 9/11, particularly for our American colleagues and friends and clients. Thank you for joining us today for this first session. Today's focus will be on sponsorship operations. We have a lot to get through. We're going to try to move fast without talking fast. As you take notes, don't worry if you miss something. We will be sharing today's presentation with all attendees within the next 24 hours. So look for that in your email box. We do have the Q&A box open. We also have the chat open, so feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We do have a lot of content today, so we may not get to questions. If we do, if time permits, we will. If we don't, please still put the questions in there, and we'll follow up with a question and answer set after the session. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Ian.
Rebecca and I are both in the same building, opposite sides of the building. We have matching brickwork, as it turns out. Rebecca, my colleague, Rebecca Shanks, will be co-presenting with me today. Between us, we have bring a combined of almost 60 years of sponsorship experience to the call today. So I guess, Rebecca, that puts you and I both in our very late 30s, I think.
Early.
Very early 30s. I'm in my late 30s, you're in your early 30s.
I started very young in this business.
That's right, as did I.
Yeah.
In terms of an agenda for today's session, we're going to do a very little bit about us, and most of you on the call know who we are. We're going to cover a few different areas of sponsorship operations, or as we also call sponsorship governance. There's a lot to cover within the hour available. We're going to touch on a few of them and stay for a high level at that. We'll talk about stakeholder management, the importance of that across the organization. We'll talk about risk management, the importance of that within the context of your sponsorship investments in your portfolio. We'll talk about some portfolio management and routines. We'll talk about some contract basics for sponsorship agreements, and then we'll look at some portfolio key KPIs, key performance indicators. I should have mentioned off the top also, this is a brand owner only session. There are no properties here, there are no agencies here, it's just brand owners. This is intended for you as the audience. First, a very little bit about us. We do work across 21 different country markets, as well as support global organizations. We do have reps in. Over the last 10 years, we've evaluated over 3,000 different kinds of sponsorships, from sports, arts, culture, cause, community properties, athletes, entertainers, as well as cross-promotional partnerships. We are brand side only. We feel we can bring the best value to our clients by remaining unbiased in our advice. We do have competitors that work for both properties and brands. We remain brand side only. While we are specialized and expert in brand side sponsorship marketing, we are full service from a sponsorship perspective. We help clients with sponsorship strategy, property evaluation and valuation, which are a bit different, sponsorship operations and governance that we're here to talk about today, measurement of the impact and of sponsorship and all things that come in between. We also have a set of software tools that help our brand owner clients to be more efficient, more effective in their sponsorship, including our AI-driven sponsorship proposal management tool, Touchstone, which has just been fully rebuilt, and the fourth generation of Touchstone launched last month. I mentioned earlier that this is the first of our three-part Fundamentals of Sponsorship series. Session 2 will be full focus on data around sponsorship. That will be a week from today, same bat time, same bat channel. Session 3 will focus on strategy, and that will be 2 weeks from today. Please join us for both of those content-rich sessions. So let's face it, sponsorship is messy. Even a smallish size sponsorship portfolio will include properties across geographies with different contract term dates, maybe supporting different brands or business units within your organization with different objectives. And to that, add to that, that there are a few initiatives across the organization that will include as many different stakeholders, internal stakeholder groups. That would be brand, sales, trade marketing, procurement, legal, HR, public affairs, investor relations, all of that brings with it a lot of complexity. In many organizations, as we see it, those that are responsible for sponsorship are often barely keeping up with the necessities, let alone finding time to ensure that those valuable assets, sponsorship assets, are being fully activated and fully measured, and that they are aligned to brand and commercial objectives. There is a better way, though, and this is what we're here to talk about a little bit today. So what do we mean when we say sponsorship operations? Sponsorship operations, or sponsorship governance, as we also call it sometimes, is the structured processes, policies, and routines we use to manage our brand's sponsorship investments, ensuring they're aligned to our objectives and that they're maximizing for return on investment and return on equity. With the time available today, we'll only be covering a few aspects of sponsorship operations. But that said, broadly speaking, effective sponsorship operations or governance includes establishing clear roles and responsibilities and expectations within your organization and for the stakeholders involved in sponsorship, setting performance metrics, evaluating sponsorship opportunities, both new and renewing, managing omni-channel activation, managing contracts and compliance, and also fostering internal and external communication so that the overall stakeholder group, both internal and external might include your property partners, your agency partners, your consulting partners, that communication is strong and helps make things effective and efficient. So here is the high-level framework that we customize to each of our clients' needs. Feel free to borrow, adapt, steal this for your needs, recognizing that it is high level. So from a framework perspective, the shaded area in gray is the what, the shaded area in blue is the how. I'll start with the what. It's important to have a set of sponsorship principles that would be customized and unique to your organization. We certainly help our clients develop those. Depending on your category, depending on your business, those principles could include, for example, if you're in beverage alcohol, we have some friends on the line today that are in beverage alcohol. One of your sponsorship principles might be we don't sponsor properties where legal drinking age and over is less than 70% of the total audience size. That might be one of your sponsorship principles. Your sponsorship principles should also include what is your activation to rights fee ratio targets. That doesn't mean that that target is the same across all of your portfolio, across all of your geographies, but it would be important to have that as part of your principles. If you ever need some help with developing those, please reach out. But that's the starting point for the governance model. And then we're going to go fairly quickly, again, with time available from left to right. I'm happy to connect with anyone afterwards to discuss this in more detail. So on the far left, first, it's important to have a sponsorship strategy. I mentioned sponsorship principles are part of that, but often we see sponsorship strategies non-existent or sponsorship strategies that don't actually draft behind brand and commercial strategies. That would be a gap. It's important that the sponsorship strategy is supporting your overall commercial and brand strategy. And think about it in terms of long and short term. Often a brand developing a new strategy where one might not exist, or adapting one, or improving one, often feels that we need to get fully bright right away. Well, we don't actually. Let's maybe think about crawling, then walking, then running, then sprinting. And often it's important to think in terms of 1, 3, 5-year horizons for sponsorship, because typically deals run longer than 30 days. And therefore it's important to think in terms of short and long term. Then moving left to right, we think about how we pre-evaluate and pre-evaluate and then negotiate our deals. So what is the value of the category rates we're acquiring? Are we sure that we have the right asset blend and asset mix? And are we sure we have the right assets to support our objectives and our needs? Following that is what is the negotiation strategy on any particular deal? Rebecca's going to speak to a deal process in a moment, or in a few minutes rather, but negotiation strategy helps you understand how do we optimize the value proposition in the deal to get the right assets for the right spend, to get in front of the right audience with the right target efficiency. And the next before we get into a particular sponsorship, but also looking for the portfolio broadly, is what are the KPIs we're going to set for ourselves so we know if we're being effective when we execute. Next would be, how are we managing our properties and how are we maintaining visibility for our leadership, for our stakeholders within our organization, and what are all of those different aspects of the efforts we're making to ensure that we have that visibility and maintain the support of the funders and the leadership, but also that we're managing the rights effectively, we're optimizing, we're getting what we bought, we're ensuring that the deals are delivering what they've promised to deliver, and that includes not only asset management, but also contracting. Next, we're going to jump into post-measurement. Again, this is very high level. This could take a year to implement, not to scare anyone off on the call, but post-measurement is, okay, once we've established those KPIs we talked about in box number 2, let's make sure we're scorecarding that property against the success of achieving those KPIs. And also, let's hold ourselves accountable. Did we activate to the extent we said we would? And if we can't or didn't, we can't find the budget to do so, should we think about less properties done better? And also, sorry, just to add to this, post-valuation. So we bought X assets that we felt were going to be worth this. Is that what actually was delivered as we end a season and a sequence with a particular property? And then next, the really vital parts are ROI and ROE. So what is this doing to deliver against the bottom of our funnel? And are we getting results in a time frame that the organization is going to be comfortable with? The next is, what are we doing for brand health? So return on equity, return for ROE. Are we moving the needle in terms of how the fans, the community around a particular property are thinking and behaving about our brand differently? And then the last piece in our governance model is really evolving, and our term is Kaizen, but best practice building. So ensuring that we're finding the best practices within each of our properties across geographies and sharing those across, that we're learning. If we're a global organization and we're executing football really effectively in Colombia, what can we learn from that we can bring to life in Brazil or in Belgium, for example? So that's the high-level framework for our governance model. Now I'm going to flip it over to Rebecca, who's going to talk for a bit about stakeholder management.
Thanks, Ian. So as Ian showed you with the governance model, it's almost impossible to do all of that yourself. If you're a brand manager or in sponsorship, and I've sat in those roles before when I was on the brand side, we really want to make sure that you're involving all of those key internal stakeholders. And Ian mentioned some of them off the top, especially at a larger organization. If you don't have relationships with those different people, and if they're not involved in some way in the especially larger sponsorships or your overall portfolio, you just won't have the chance to be as effective with that investment. So we know that there's a lot of internal stakeholders to manage. They're listed on the screen, so I won't read through each one, but I'll just speak to the importance of, and some examples of how that can come together. The communication process between them is really critical in order to effectively, manage your portfolio and gain that engagement. If you think about, if you're a sponsorship manager or a brand leading your sponsorship relationship externally, you also want to make sure internally that you have those right people involved. So some examples include ensuring that your sales and trade marketing teams know that they can leverage any pass-through rights. You're leaving rights and value on the table if you're not effectively activating all of those rights. Working with your connections team, if you have one, at a larger organization, brand management is often split between a number of different people. So work with the people that are creating those TV ads, make sure that they know that they can leverage really expensive rights that you've paid for, especially if you think about when it's Olympics and Paralympics. You're paying for the rights to be able to activate. You're not paying for an asset that you'll see on TV because it's a clean field of play. You need to be activating those rights, and your internal teams need to know how to go through that process, because it is a big process. There are lots of approvals involved. And when it comes to approvals, making sure that you're connected with your procurement team and your finance team and your legal team, whether it's through contracting or how you budget for things internally, who's paying for what. These are all really important and critical things to make sure that you're managing your portfolio effectively. And then finally, think about how you can work with PR. You can drive a ton of earned media value from your partnership, whether it's through announcements, even things internally with HR. Internal engagement is a huge part of what you can leverage from a rights standpoint for larger or even smaller partnerships. It doesn't have to be the large ones, but for large ones, that's often a big reason why brands are going in and sponsoring things like the Olympics and Paralympics. For myself, I did work at Coca-Cola for a number of years. And when I was there, we really leveraged the Olympic Games partnership internally as much as externally. And through that, I had the chance to be an Olympic torchbearer. I never would have been an Olympic torchbearer if I had not had that chance through the rights that they had to have torchbearer people internally. So it was, one of the most memorable parts of my life. And it was one of the reasons why I stayed there for so long. And it's the same with any big company. You really want to make sure, or small, that you are leveraging those rights, whether it's tickets, whether it's being a torch bearer, whether it's just, getting engaged from a conversation standpoint with athletes at your internal meetings. Tons of opportunity. So it's worth involving all of those people, because it's just way too much to take on if you happen to be one brand manager, one sponsorship manager.
And Rebecca, I think the importance of bringing internal stakeholders into the conversation early. Time was the sponsorship team would skip back into the organization and say, look what we've acquired, and then the sales team would say, well, that's wonderful, but we don't have room in our calendar to activate that in the trade, for example.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we'll talk about here. So having that, the stakeholder management and working with all of those groups will enable that visibility early on. It'll enable accountability, making sure that people understand what their role is in bringing that to life, because it is often too much for one person. Making sure that you have alignment early on and throughout the process. And then you will get more investment efficiency if you're doing all of those things. So taking that all into account, these are first principles that we make sure that we work with our clients on. And they're really fundamental truths or things that you should be doing. You want to ensure that you have senior buy-in on both sides. Both sides meaning at your brand, but also with the partner. You want to bring all of your stakeholders in early, as Ian said, and understand how they plan and what their timing needs are. Different groups within your organization will have different timelines to get things done. You need to understand that to make sure you can actually really take advantage of and maximize all of the opportunity with your partnership. You want to understand all of those different and sometimes competing priorities and what winning looks like to the different groups within your organization. Sales might have a different priority than marketing, and understanding that, being able to speak to both of those things will help you be more effective. You want to plan for funding for the rights and for activation. As Ian said, it sometimes is forgotten, usually not now. I think it's universally agreed that we need to spend more money on activation, but it's not always budgeted for at the beginning, and understanding where that budget is coming from and securing those dollars is really important. And who's paying for it internally. It may come from multiple budgets. So working with those groups early on is key. And then you want to make sure that you are working with groups that understand how to properly value your sponsorship. If that's not something you can do internally, it's, as Ian said, it's something we can do, but your agency partners, work with them, bring them in early as well. And then, develop a way for continuous feedback. As Ian said, a value that we have is Kaizen and continuous improvement, but making sure you're consulting with those different groups throughout and having a feedback loop will ensure better engagement right from the start and throughout the length of the partnership. So this is a big one. You won't be able to read everything on the screen right now. That's not really the point of this. I think it's to show that here's a deal process map. As Ian said, with the governance model, we would show this, and we'll share this this presentation with you. But this really shows how different stakeholders can become involved throughout the sponsorship process. So in this case, the trigger event at the top is a sponsorship renewal. And we're including key process steps, including having an initial meeting with the partner, reviewing what the current deal and what's been happening with that and how it's been performing, and then gaining some internal awareness at the leadership level right from the start. You might not know where you're going to sit with it yet, but you want everyone to know that you are going into this negotiation.
One of the keys here, Rebecca, also is in sort of phase one here, before we spend the time, resources, energy to re-up or reevaluate the proposal, let's get all the stakeholders internally together to see if it's satisfying their objectives. Is it working? And hopefully you've engaged them through the entire execution phase, so you would end up with a good understanding of that. And then let's go to leadership before we spend time and energy and say, as leadership or funders aligned to us moving forward with a renewal here.
Well, that's just it. I mean, it's a lot of work to negotiate a larger sponsorship, and you don't want to go too far down the path and realize that you weren't aligned from the start. It can be a lot more work for everyone in the end. And, quite frankly, not always fair to the partner either. And brands everyone wants mutual value in these partnerships. From there, you want to develop a full business case, and that's where you'll really get that leadership alignment and sign off, whether it's on spend caps, going through into negotiating the actual deal with the partner, working with legal on the contract. These are all key moments where you're working with those different stakeholders that we just mentioned on the previous slide. And then you want to make sure that you're working with your connections team, if you have them, or your marketing team and your PR team on activation planning. Bring them in early. If you bring them in and understand what their priorities are, they can even get into the actual specific contract itself if it's something that the property is going to be managing. And if it's something that you're doing, just leveraging the rights, start that planning early so you can be really effective and have more engagement across the organization. And then you even want to make sure that you've got matched contacts between the property and internally. It might not be that one person is holding every single contact point between the property and the brand. So for example, at some point, your social teams may work together to drive some really great storytelling. And then finally, tracking, and Ian talked about this as well, but making sure you're working with those different stakeholders on tracking, measuring, and reporting. It's really important to understand as you go through the partnership, not just waiting until the end, that there is an opportunity for feedback and change. It's not worth waiting to the end when you spent a lot of money and then realizing, well, it didn't perform for us. Did you discuss that? Did you have that chance for feedback? So at a very high level, that's what that deal process map can look like. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Ian.
Yeah, just on the partnership relationship management, the match context is important, because as you go through the execution of a particular property, when you get to renewal time, you're going to have a more successful execution of a renewal when there are strong relationships across both organizations. So making sure things like how often, if it's a big deal, how often should our CEO have lunch with their CEO? How often should our sales team be able to call, if there's a sales opportunity with the property, to call on the property as a customer, and making sure we're serving them well from that perspective. Though that strength of relationship also means that when there are benefits to be had that aren't contractually obligated, we will get them first. I like to think about being the property's favorite partner, the one they use for case studies, because that means we're going to get more value and values to be had that's not contractually obligated.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, risk management. So this is a big one. Ian and I will tackle this one again a bit together. But it is critically important. Obviously, we all know that, but we really take a structured approach to risk management. And it's something that should be considered before going into a partnership, looking at your total portfolio, considered for larger properties as well. You might have a separate framework, and we'll get to the framework at the end of this section, but it is a big topic, so we'll jump in.
And this is an area that most brands neglect until the house is on fire. And our perspective is, let's plan for things in advance so that we have binders on the shelf to pull off when something does go badly. And when it goes badly in a sponsorship context, it really goes badly. People might remember 6 or 7 years ago, a music festival in Las Vegas where there was a live active shooter across the road and 60 people lost their lives. That was a property that we had been looking at for a client, and it didn't fit the objectives and it didn't fit the strategy, so we opted not to renew it. And when I first saw that headline, my heart and my stomach sunk, because I thought, what would happen if that was our client's name title sponsor and we weren't prepared for that? And at what point do we have to get the president of the client out of bed and say something's gone really badly and really sideways?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, that brings us to beware of the risk that exists in your portfolio. These are all things that need to be considered. And we really recommend taking a look at your entire portfolio and then undercovering risks by asking yourself some of these key questions. So when it comes to governance and transparency, how is the property or partner managed? What's their board relationship like with their management team? Are they on the same page? Are they known for being transparent if something should go wrong? Or are they known for hiding things? When it comes to illegal activity or when it comes to misconduct on their side, obviously do a background check beforehand, but if anything's going on currently that might impact your brand, you need to think about, do you want to continue associating with that partner? And then, as Ian mentioned, such a tragic case of life safety. Are there life safety concerns? And people may not have considered that one. That was such a rare, unique case, but really taking a hard look at what could happen and what are we willing to do and when do you call the president? And it's really scenario planning against those different things. And sometimes it's a lot more obvious than others, but sometimes it's not. You wouldn't necessarily think that could happen, but everyone since then has planned differently when it comes to concerts.
And it does happen, the bombing at the Munich Games, the bombing at the Atlanta Games, the bombing at the Boston Marathon. It does happen. And it's really important. We use a scorecard that we developed after that incident in Vegas. The same year we had an incident also in North America where a tornado went through a music festival site, and it was 24 hours before everyone could get off the site because of the nature of the damage to roads. So what is our confidence in the property's preparedness? And do they have plans in place that they can pull at the ready when things do go sideways, if they do go sideways?
Absolutely. And beyond life safety, what's their approach to environmental sustainability and social equity? You should be asking for your partner's practices around the environment and their practices with respect to DEI, especially in today's environment. These are really important. You want to make sure you are values aligned, because this can be really damaging to your brand if you're not. And look at where you are open to risk and where they are open to risk and how that can impact your brand.
And we like to think about, what's the light between the brand's position on sustainability, for example, and the property partners, and consumers, press, others will hold us to account if our values that we say are true and sound don't show up in the property partners, in some cases that we have our name attached to. Mm-hmm. And that also creates opportunity. Is there opportunity for us to help that property get to a better place in line with our values? Is there an opportunity for us to activate around our commitment to ESG within that property, so that we have a demonstration point for those commitments we make around ESG?
Okay, so we take both a proactive, or we recommend taking both a proactive and reactive approach to risk management, and really planning for both. And we talked about a lot of this on the previous page, so we don't need to spend a lot of time here, but you do want to understand your property's governance protocols and how transparent they are. Make sure that you are putting in place a life safety scorecard, a social equity scorecard, and environmental sustainability scorecard. Did you want to touch on this one more, Ian?
Yeah, Rebecca and I in the last 18 months have been in the war rooms where national sporting organizations that our clients were sponsors of had impropriety around sexual misconduct that was covered up, impropriety around balanced treatment of both genders, all genders, and the risk to our clients' brand reputation in all. There was 3 different cases in the last 18 months was meaningful. So not only understanding what the risk opportunity is, but understanding is that particular organization got good governance, to use really crude language, do they have got good governance so that we have confidence that if things do go sideways, they're prepared to deal with it in a transparent manner.
And then from a reactive standpoint, how can you be prepared when something does go wrong? And we'll go into a framework and a model that we use, as Ian said, that we've been planning with our clients for different situations. But you want to make sure that you're not waiting until something goes wrong, that you're prepared to react immediately. A lot of bias can always happen. You need to remove that and be ready. And if you set out in advance of what are those moments when you're going to trigger, whether it's getting the president out of bed, be prepared for that. And then you can act on it immediately. And you don't need to have, maybe a last minute phone call with all of those stakeholders to try and come up with that scenario, because you already have it. You already have alignment on what that moment is. So whether it's a morality clause, set out in your contracts, and Ian's going to go into some contract basics afterwards, so we don't need to spend a ton of time here, but you need to detail out those moments where breach of contract will happen and what the consequences are. Scenario planning, so those specific scenarios and conditions that are leadership approved, the responses, and having it ready, that include terminating the sponsorship agreement and if necessary. And that has, as Ian mentioned, that's happened before, and it's happened with us and clients recently. Be prepared for that. And if you're aligned in advance, it goes much more smoothly and you can react more quickly. Pre-draft communication. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Rebecca, just the nature of that is that you can't spend 36 or 48 hours assembling your senior team, getting your PR people in the room, determining what your response will be, because your customers, your consumers, your employees expect better of you. You need to be able to be ready to respond in a way that aligns with your values and also supports the protection of your brand equity.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, have those media responses ready. Have the good media responses ready and the bad ones. Have them 85% complete, and you can fill in the details and you can react very quickly. And then have emergency protocols in place. Guidance on when to alert key people within the organization, whether it's the board of directors, legal counsel, et cetera, and your customers. Depending on the type of brand that you are, you have your consumers, but you also have your customers that you might be selling through. When do you involve them in these conversations? So being ready for that. So then bringing all of this together into actual scenario planning, we use a framework that where we plan for risk, and whether it's when do we go faster, when do we lean in, and it might be positive things that we feel that we want to respond really quickly and amp up what we're doing with the property. When do we want to slow things down or pump the brakes? Because there might be things going on that are, we don't really know what's going to happen yet, but let's slow down what we're doing. Maybe we pull back some of the media buy. When do we want to stop what we're doing and reassess because a major occurrence has happened? And when do we need to, as we call it, break the glass? There's an existential crisis. This will require, as we say here, a major retooling of the partnership, including possible termination. So we'll show on the next slide what that framework can look like.
Yeah, and Rebecca, I won't use brands as examples, but think about a fairly significant breach of trust and illegal activity with a governing body in football in South America a number of years ago. And if you're a brand sponsor in that context, what do you do? Do you come out and say, we still support football, we believe in football, and we are not supportive of the organization's current situation, but we want to remain and be part of the solution? Or is it something where it's gone too far and you need to exit? That's maybe a good or bad example, but just understanding what those different are, which back to you, Rebecca, for that sort of planning framework.
Yeah, so Ian just gave a great example, and if you think about, I'll just do one for Go Faster and another for Break the Glass. For Go Faster, maybe your property signs a really hard to get athlete, and that's very exciting, and you want to go out with a congratulations announcement and send them all kinds of product and create a PR or storytelling moment. And that's where you could respond, be ready to go, have that product kit ready, and have a film crew there to create that moment, right through to breaking the glass. And the condition there might be that, there's a legal activity that's happened. The board at the property was covering it up. At that point, your response might be, we need to terminate this partnership. They are no longer values aligned. And being ready for that will just create a lot less stress and bias during this time. So a big topic, we could spend a lot of time on it. I know.
And that can take a lot of courage, but if you've had that discussion internally beforehand and the organization can be aligned, your executive team can be aligned that this is the situation when we would exit a partnership, it becomes easier to make those decisions in the cold light of day when the fire is not on, to mix metaphors there. And our recommendation would be have a scenario planning framework completed for your portfolio broadly, that across all of our properties, if A were to happen, we would do B, agnostic of what the property is. But then for your really large properties where you understand the risks, say it's motorsport, high risk properties, this is the planning framework that we've completed for that particular property. So we know in advance where the risks are. We've been able to assess them and measure our responses if certain conditions were to happen. And God willing, they don't happen, but preparedness is everything.
Mm-hmm. We'll go through this one pretty quickly. It's obvious. You need management routines for your portfolio. It'll help you do things more effectively, not spend time on things that you shouldn't be, and really get all of those key stakeholder groups together. So having that structure in place from the beginning is key. Everything from annual business update sessions with key stakeholders from both sides of your property, having those top to top sessions. Don't wait till the end when you're renegotiating. Do it at a minimum annually. You want to have routines in place aligned from the start of when you will meet, whether it's status meetings, bringing in your agencies. Having that in place will just help things run smoothly. This is a given, but you need an asset checklist. We recommend this being owned by the brand. You want to track fulfillment on your own end of what you've actually used from the contract. Your agency can also help you with this. And then if we just go into the next page from a...
Just quickly, Rebecca, just to double click on that first box, that notion of an annual business update. For some clients, we've run sessions where, workshops where all of the property partners come in, or from a particular type of property come in, so that we can update our property partners about where our business is at and where it's going and what we expect from them to be able to support success in our business, because that enables the property partners to have a really good understanding of how they can change, adapt, bring new ideas forward to help us with our objectives as those evolve from a year-to-year basis, particularly in a long-range partnership. But it also enables us to better understand the property business. What are they trying to achieve, and where are the opportunities for us to activate differently to help them hit their objectives and reach success for them, so that we are really collaborative partners helping build one another's business.
Yeah, for sure. And I've been in those sessions both, on the agency side and the brand side, and it makes a big difference in engagement across the board, and ensuring that there is that mutual value and respect right from the start. and ongoing throughout the partnership. Fulfillment report owned by the partner. So your partner should be providing this, or the property should be providing a report of what they have delivered on. Anytime that a make good was needed, there's times where things need to change. You want flexibility in your contract where you can actually have the ability to change assets when needed and make the partnership more valuable for both sides. But you want to be, and there are times where things can't happen because whatever reason, could be weather even. You want to make sure that you've got the opportunity to track for make goods in place. We've talked a lot about match context, so I don't think we need to spend more time on that here, but it's critical to have that set out from the start. And as Ian said, those sessions, you can also do collaborative activation planning within those sessions and internally. And having that annualized is really critical.
Thank you. So now we're going to jump over to what we call contract basics. What we do see often is that a contract is looked at as simply an administrative aspect of the sponsorship part of the partnership with a particular property, and we often see gaps in what we call those basics. So we'll jump into what some of these are now. So the first one would be your contracts with your property partner should always be on your paper. Why is that? A, it ensures that particular mandatories like indemnification, insurance coverage are embedded in. It also creates a better, quicker turn for your legal team at renewal time. So they're not looking at tasting a different kind of Caesar salad each time they see a different contract. And that means faster turn, more efficiency on your side, less weight on your legal team, which is helpful. And the asterisk is here simply because it's mostly unique to the North American market. But if you have a sports property, a team deal with one of the large leagues, MLB, NBA, and so on, those tend to need to be on a standard template from the league. They tend to be fairly partnership minded, but if you ask it to go onto your paper, what does happen is that it then needs to go up to the league for approval, which means the league now sees the specifics of your deal with a particular sport, with a particular club or team that's involved in that league, which is maybe okay, but maybe it also breaches some confidence, particularly if you're not the partner of the league and maybe your competitor is. Do you really want the league seeing that kind of aspect? The league is going to understand what each category rights is going for and what they're selling, what the teams in the league are selling for, so that information exists. But that would be the exception where it'll often be on league paper. Next would just be cadence. It's happened before where you don't follow the right cadence. You come to a deal, a shaken hand is given. Sorry, a handshake is given. So I'm dealing with some jet lag from the EU today. But once you come to that agreement, in principle, you want to make sure you have a letter of intent in place within no more than 14 days. That letter of intent will codify the business terms of the arrangement, but it'll protect you while you work through the long form agreement. The long form agreement is where the business terms are addressed, but everything else is there as well. From a contract perspective, and that should be done within no more than 60 days. Often, a property will slow that down because I'm going to talk about the second negotiation in a moment, but then you put yourself at risk because if the property partner can't move quickly to ratify the deal in a long-form agreement, there's risks there. We've talked about risk in an earlier section. So make it clear as part of the counter proposal, as part of the negotiation, that these are our expectations around how quickly we move from a contracting perspective so that we protect ourselves. The next is—
And I've actually been in that situation where I've come into a new role and a contract had been in negotiation for over a year. And it was at that long form point.
Yeah.
And then to your next point that you're about to talk to, this actually happened. So it's certainly something to keep in mind.
I've had the experience earlier in my career where we agreed with a property on rights. It got stuck in legal on the client side from an LOI perspective. And the property partner then went out and sold the rights to our client's competitor once a deal had already been agreed to. It was messy legal case, but let's avoid that. And then what we call the second negotiation is you can find that the lawyers on your side and the lawyers on their side wind up talking things out of the business terms as they're negotiating along for an agreement. So the contract comes back and you might say, wait a minute, we agreed to certain things here. Well, then, and your lawyer, your legal side in all good conscience is saying, well, they didn't feel they could commit to delivering that. Well, then they should have said that when we negotiated the deal. The second negotiation can strip assets out. It can change things like, we're going to talk about in a moment, right of first refusal, all sorts of things that have value to you and help protect your interests. The next would just be making sure you understand how the property partner, particularly if you're in markets where the regulatory level of protection for consumer data isn't as strong as it could be, or it doesn't match your standard. Make sure you understand what the property's protocol is around using data, consumer personalized information that the consumer surrendered. So again, my jet lag is babbling on me a little bit. But that understanding helps protect risk if consumer data or other things, credit card information, that sort of thing is compromised. How is the property partner protecting you so you don't wind up getting bad reputation risk there? Next, in the contract basis, the term sheet or the business terms are most effective when they're a schedule to the contract, to the long-form agreement, not when they're part of the agreement itself. Why is that? It enables you to amend it more easily. If in a 5-year deal, for example, year 3, you talk to the partner and you change some of the assets around, it's much easier and less complicated to ratify and amend the agreement if it's a schedule rather than amending the entire agreement. Cheaper, faster, all the things. Next, force majeure language has changed a lot since March of 2020. Make sure your force majeure language is modernized, that it understands more than just pandemic. It understands, it contemplates things that would require the contractor not to deliver the value you've expected. Ensure you've pre-negotiated what happens when assets and value isn't delivered. If there's work stoppage, it happened in the pandemic where work stopped, but if, say, there's a CBA disagreement and the players go on strike, if it's a sports context, what are the deals and make goods that happen that you've pre-considered? And because to pat ourselves as Lunacy on the back a little bit, when we went to renegotiate make goods on behalf of many of our clients during the pandemic, it was quick and easy because we pre-considered what happened if they couldn't deliver value. We weren't going to the table hoping for our best foot forward. We pre-negotiated. The next, and that's also work stoppage as an example, sorry, but also non-fulfillment of assets. If they can't deliver, well, then what happens? What are the make goods that are pre-considered? Rebecca mentioned earlier the notion of fulfillment reports. Contractually obligate the partner to provide those. Be very specific on the format you expect that to come in, so you can share it internally. I don't mean verbatim flip the document over, but what are the things your sales team needs to see? What are the things your public affairs team needs to see so that they can complete their understanding of what was delivered from a partnership perspective? And the last piece on this particular slide is require audited turnstile. Turnstile is simply the number of guests, the number of fans, the number of people that went to a music festival, went to a sports game. Because if a property, we've experienced this recently in the EU, where the property was saying, well, here's the capacity of our venue. Well, that's interesting, but we want eyeballs and engagement and connection. We don't want capacity. So audited turnstile simply means their public accounting firm, be it Deloitte or others, have confirmed what the turnstile is. It's not simply this loose number that you're expecting that isn't bankable. Okay, a few other things that make sure I've added in the exclusive negotiation window, and make sure that from a brand perspective, shorter window is better. Because if the window is short and it's within a reasonable amount of time before the end of the term, that means there's going to be pressure on the property partner to move quickly. They can't stall us. Make sure that window is short. Make sure the window starts on receipt of a proposal for renewal, not at a particular date and time, because if the property partner is trying to draw you out, let's make sure if they're trying to draw you out through negotiation, if the window doesn't start until the the proposal is sent, they can't stall us. Hopefully that was clear. Was that clear, Rebecca? Good, thank you. The next is the first right of negotiation. So if the property adds new assets, so say you have a deal with a multi-team sports entity, if they add new teams, new buildings, new entities under their umbrella, they need to come to you first to negotiate the category rights. You may choose not to accept them, but they can't go to market until they come to you. The next would be right of first refusal. So if you negotiate through a sequence with the property partner, you don't come to a deal, they take it to market. First, right of first refusal means they need to come back to you before they confirm it with another category competitor at the deal, at the level of deal they're offering that category competitor. So you have an ability to say yes or no again. Moving right along, Rebecca, thanks for the time check. Next would be right to match. So if it's a bit of an extension of right of first refusal, if they go to market, I'm saying the same thing twice here. They need to come back to us first to say, we have an offer bona fide from a category competitor for the rights that you currently have we haven't negotiated to confirm for the next term. Here is the right to match against that. Values termination clause. We talked about that in an earlier point of the session, is making sure that if we've been very specific, if the property partner breaches values that we hold true, we have the ability to exit or at least provide feedback to them, feedback in air quotes. The last is right of notification. Going back to that risk management, if these kinds of things happen within your organization, we as a sponsor need to be notified within X days, X minutes, X hours of those happening, so we understand the risk there. And then I'm going to jump very quickly into key performance indicators, and we just have a couple of slides left. So these are the KPIs that you should have across your portfolio, but across your particular property partners. So one is a scorecard that measures your return on investment, which also includes return on equity. That should go across your full portfolio. So how is your full portfolio performing against those KPIs? It should go by property type. So how are all our music festivals performing against a particular scorecard that would be customized to our music festival set of properties? The next would be by geography. How are all our properties in the Mexico market performing? So we have an understanding of benchmarking one against the other. And I won't read all of these. Again, this deck's going to come, but return on objectives, target efficiency, cost per touch are important aspects and important contributors to those KPIs. Next would be value to rates fee ratio. By full portfolio, by property type, and by geography, because those aren't going to be all the same across your portfolio. For every currency unit, euro, dollar, peso we're spending on rights, what are we getting back in terms of value? So you can benchmark properties against your targets, but also against your portfolio overall. Cost per point, that just means cost per touch, be it a media touch, a live touch. What is it costing us to get to each of those touches, each of those consumer action points, and make sure we're looking at that by portfolio, property type, and again by geography. And then the last one would be rights to activation ratio across your full portfolio, by property type, by geography. Why does this matter? Because it enables the organization to align to a target by property type, by geography, and broadly, so that we can be held accountable as an organization to say, let's not buy things we don't have the budget or the resources to activate. And if we can't commit to that ratio and target against it, then we should really be considering what we're including as part of those properties. This is the end of the presentation. This is the end of the discussion, and thank you for your patience as I got through my time change here. So what we're going to share with you after this session is this presentation. They'll come to you within 24 hours. We're also going to send you our most updated 2024 sponsorship glossary. These are the set of terms, some of you may already have this, that help you better understand what is the vernacular, the acronyms, the terms that are important and used in sponsorship, so you have better understanding. That can be half the battle. We're also going to send you a copy of our Future of Sponsorship, Evolution of Sponsorship rather, report that we did with our strategic partner last fall, the WFA, the World Federation of Advertisers. Next, an offer out. So if you have a challenge that you're scratching your head over, a particular thing you'd like to have a conversation around, we're offering to anyone on the call today, no cost, no obligation, no expectations. Happy to spend 30 minutes with you if we can be of any help there at all. And then second, lastly, is a reminder again of the 2 next sessions in this series. The second one will be a week from today, data and sponsorship. And the session number 3, 2 weeks from today, sponsorship strategy. So that brings us to minutes on the clock. We're back into the top of the hour. We thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you for your time. Please do reach out with questions if there was something wasn't addressed. I see there are some questions in the Q&A. We'll make sure we get a Q&A set back after this. So leaving you about 90 seconds early. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day, evening. And we will hopefully see you a week from today for our next series session. And thank you, Rebecca. It was great co-presenting with you.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, everyone, for joining.
Bye, everyone.